We do have a special guest today, so I don't want to waste any more time in bringing out Daniel House, who's the founder of Gophers Guru. Daniel, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me. Big week. Not every day you get the potential #1 team in the country coming into Huntington Bank Stadium.
Hey, well, I appreciate you saying that. That's very nice of you. So, we obviously wanted to bring on an expert on the Golden Gophers, and kind of looking at your perspective on the team. So, just so that everybody knows, it's going to be 7:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC, which I'm still getting used to, games that aren't Notre Dame on NBC. So with Michigan favored by 20.5, that's quite a bit, considering it's an away game for Michigan. But Daniel, what's your kind of initial sense of this matchup here for Minnesota?
Well, it's one of those games where you have to execute every possible play that you have. You have to play a perfect game almost, not make mistakes, take care of the football, limit explosive plays. And Minnesota throughout the season, it's been a roller coaster ride in a sense where the first 5 games you really experienced every type of win that you possibly could and every type of loss. Where the first game, Nebraska found a way to win, game-winning field goal right at the end. The unknowns of a first game against a new coach, the 3-3-5. Play Eastern Michigan the next week. You just run the ball all over the place. The breakout game for true freshman Darius Taylor. North Carolina missed a ton of opportunities in the passing game. If you just execute a few plays here or there in that game, you potentially have a chance to win. They gave up a few explosives early, settled in defensively. They ran the ball well, did some cool things in the run game, but just nothing. Not everything came together in that game. Then Northwestern, you have a 31-10 lead in the fourth quarter, 21 points, and it's just uncharacteristic lapses. I mean, zone drop mistakes, biting on a double move, getting beat over the top going into halftime. The offense didn't sustain drives in the second half. At the beginning, they had like 3 drives that didn't span more than 2 minutes. That put a lot of pressure on the defense. Special teams couldn't down a punt inside the 5 and really needed to get 1 first down at the end and would have won that game. So just a crazy ending. And then last week, trailing 17-14 at the half, the offense was able to perform pretty efficiently, I thought. Finished drives with touchdowns, had 5 of the drives past Louisiana's 40-yard line and with touchdowns. First half, it was just pass rush lane issues. Zeon Chris is just able to escape, scramble, keep some plays alive on passing downs. But Minnesota found a way to play, a cleaner game offensively. I thought early down efficiency was good, which put them in some favorable short yardage situations. So playing a game like this, kind of what I'm saying is Minnesota hasn't put together a complete game in all 3 phases yet. So if they are able to do that and limit the amount of explosive plays they've been allowing, just timely ones that have impacted the flow of the game, I think that's going to be the big thing as I look at this offense, being able to, Michigan run the ball, J.J. McCarthy's accuracy out play action over the middle of the field. I mean, you see some of the numbers that you're looking at in the film that I'm watching. I'm like, this is going to be a daunting task for sure.
Well, and for those of us who remember AJ Henning, and who completely shook our head at the first game Northwestern played, where it seemed like they didn't use him, and when they did use him and they threw it to him on an out route or something, he would either overthrow or underthrow him. And I'm like, this guy transfers to Northwestern, and this is what happens. But in the game against Minnesota, AJ Henning did get 11 receptions, 82 yards, a touchdown, and so that was a pretty solid performance from him. So those of us who kind of try to watch AJ Henning and really all of the Wolverine alums, as they go to their new team, was interesting. But just kind of diving into the offense a little bit more, what I noticed from the Louisiana game is so when I think PJ Fleck and I think offense and I think of those teams with like Kirk Shiroka and like 2019 and Tanner Morgan beats Penn State and all of these types of things. Like that's what I think of when I think Minnesota. But when I look at the stat line for the Louisiana game, what I noticed was the run game had 51 carries, right? 201 yards, 3 touchdowns. Zach Evans and Bryce Williams obviously had big games. But so it seemed like you were really getting it done on the rushing side, whereas with the passing side, just seemed like not as much going on there. Khalif Manis did have a nearly perfect game in terms of completion versus attempt, but got a pick. And yeah, just if I'm just looking at the two sides, it just looked like the run game was a bit more successful. Do you think it could be a little bit more balanced when you play Michigan? Because you know that Michigan's run defense is probably one of the best in the entire country.
Yeah, just looking at Michigan overall, I mean, the defensive front being able to rotate so much. I mean, I'm watching, it's just like a NASCAR pit stop. It's like you got Jalen Harrell, you got Derek Moore, you got Mason Graham hasn't been playing, but, Josiah Stewart rotating in. I mean, a lot of people would take him as a primary guy at their program. Chris Jenkins in there. Like, I just watched the defensive line. I go, this thing is very, very talented and deep, and one of the best defensive line groups rotationally in the country. But then you look at Jesse Minter's scheme, that single high base defense with some blended cover 3 and 1, some quarters, cover 6 combination stuff.
Very multiple D. That's what I always say. Multiple
that
D.
Quick post snap rotation where you're just rocking and rolling right at the snap, making it hard for the offensive coordinator to figure out what type of coverage you're going to get, and the quarterback has to ID that. You bring in some simulated pressures, some blitz stuff dashed in. I was impressed with the nickel blitz stuff with Sainer still. You got to be ready for a lot of different looks that you're potentially going to see. And Michigan hasn't really had to show a lot of those in these games yet, just because of how the game scripts have gone, taking control of these games. And then in the fourth quarter, you got a lot of players that you're rotating in to get some reps. So when I look at this game, Minnesota, running the football is going to be a tough task. You're going to have to be very creative. I thought that's what Minnesota did a good job against Louisiana with. Being able to do a lot of different things in the run game, mixing in more counter looks, trying to get numbers advantages, looking at what they did formationally. I wrote a site on the website today about motion and formation and how that helped them in the run game. Minnesota didn't have Darius Taylor, who's been the breakout player, true freshman running back. Potentially maybe comes back this week, but you have to remember Minnesota's got a bye week next week and then a huge game with Iowa. So will he come back and play? Not sure, but Zach Evans comes in the game and plays extremely well. And Minnesota, Darius Taylor had won the previous 3 Big Ten Freshman of the Week awards. Zach Evans comes in the game and he wins the Big Ten Freshman of the Week as running back. So Minnesota's had 4 in a row and 2 different running backs do it. So running game is definitely bread and butter, but Minnesota, the passing game, they have been, play action, bootleg stuff last week was very successful, able to hit on a smash concept with a corner and a hitch, holding the corner and then hitting Daniel Jackson in the end zone. Those crossing routes, the play action crossers, getting the ball out in space. Corey Crooms has been a very nice addition for Minnesota from Western Michigan. A shifty, dynamic slot receiver who has very good hands and can do some things underneath. Minnesota will blend between that play action game, but bring some RPO into the mix as well. They've been sort of mixing between those two conceptual wrinkles. So Minnesota, definitely going to have to be balanced, try to maybe stack some things up, get some switch releases going to try to get guys open, motioning players open, and then, dashing in the running game, maybe some screens. The advantage they have, maybe that people aren't talking about as much, is Kirk Sherrock is the offensive coordinator at Rutgers. He used to be at Minnesota. Yep. You got Joe Arsimiak's the defensive coordinator at Rutgers. So they just played Michigan. So Minnesota has the relationships there to maybe find out some things. Hey, what would you have done differently? What things worked systemically, system-wise, are very similar. So that's something to watch for as Minnesota enters this game from a preparation standpoint.
Well, what's your take on Khalif Manis and his ability to run the football? Because I did see he was able to score it looked like a rushing touchdown against Louisiana. Or at the very least, he was able to run the ball a bit against Louisiana. I will say that normally rushing quarterbacks tend to be a bit tougher for us than ones that are more pocket quarterbacks. It didn't seem to be a problem last week against Nebraska's quarterback, who was able to usually do that. What's your take on what you've seen with him so far? Compared to Tanner Morgan, obviously being there 20 years. And finally running out of eligibility. What has that transition been like?
Yeah, Ethan can definitely keep it in his own read occasionally, scramble around. He had, a couple plays where he's been pretty aware to step up and scramble. Actually, it's an aspect of his game that's been not talked about a lot, is being able to, find those lanes, step up and, move the chains occasionally. So he can do that. The
Mhm.
play action game, the bootleg game is something that Minnesota's been putting in, allowing him to take advantage of his arm strength. I mean, the big thing here is like developing pace and tempo as a quarterback, where it's like, he has a lot of arm strength, so he's throwing that ball really, really hard. Developing some touch on the throws is something that I've been working on. Pocket movement, understanding the drop depths, the footwork, all the things that you have to do with the quarterback position. So Ethan has like the arm talent to make all the throws on the field. Now it's like putting all the pieces together and executing those plays when they were available. If you watch the North Carolina game, there's a couple of big crossing route hits that Minnesota dialed up, timed up perfectly. Weren't able to hit those. You think, if you're able to connect there, there's two plays that are potentially touchdowns. Another one where you got man coverage, a tight end delay, and the ball's thrown behind. And if it's thrown out in front of him, it's probably a touchdown. So Calic Manis, I feel he's played maybe his two best consecutive games back to back
Sure.
here. So I feel like he's starting to. People forget he didn't have much high school playing experience. Lost a whole year due to COVID. Then comes in here, doesn't play a whole lot, comes into games, gets some experience, but starting games, putting together those experience, those reps where you're going to see a lot of different things. He has these first 5 games system wise, witnessed a lot of different coverage things and schemes that he hasn't played against before. So I feel as if he's starting to really get a foundation underneath him here and maybe getting a groove, because I think I would say last game's maybe the best game Calic Manis has played at Minnesota, just managing everything that you have to in this offensive system.
Yeah, I mean, it does look like he's made strides, and you normally see that when you're starting a new quarterback, and they go through the first couple of weeks of growing pains, and then they start to get a bit more of a feel for it. So that'll be something that Michigan will need to contain, obviously, and from a defensive side, of course, you've had games where you were able to keep teams to very few points, and I think, of course, of the Nebraska game where they only scored 10 points the entire game, which is pretty impressive. Obviously, you kept Eastern Michigan to 6. So you had games where clearly you were able to contain teams. Not the next couple, not as much, but definitely you clearly have some players who were able to make plays. So walk us through kind of how the defense has been going this year, and maybe some impact players to watch out for.
Yeah, the big thing on the defensive side of the ball is Cody Lindenberg, probably their second best defensive player, one of their elite tier defensive guys, a linebacker. Got hurt a week before the season started, hasn't been able to play, and he was a catalyst player in that defense, getting things adjusted, making a lot of calls, filling the shoes of Mariano Sori-Marin, who'd been with the program for a long time. Just a player who was the glue of that defense and the heartbeat. Cody Lindenberg was ready to slide in there when you're at practices, seeing Cody, the strides that he made. He was on pace to be one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten. Like, the expectation level was extremely high. Well, he's unable to go, so you're playing second-year linebacker Maverick Baranowski, who has limited reps, limited experience. So he's been up and down in games, getting used to, some of the things you got to do with zone drops and, eye discipline, not taking the cheese in certain areas of your game, just learning and going through that player development process, which is expected. I mean, that developmental process is not linear. It's going to be up and down. And when you're playing a second year player, that's definitely impacted the defense a bit, just the communication. Trayvon Jones, a late ad from Elon, a cornerback, has played well, but a player who arrived late that's trying to get chemistry with everybody. And then defensive line wise, I think they've put a big emphasis on improving their pass rush this offseason. You definitely saw a huge jump in pressures already, getting into the middle percentile in the FBS and pressures. Jalen Logan Redding, Ja Joyner, both good pass rushers. And then Anthony Smith, who led the team with 5 pressures last week, freshman player who, when you watch the game, watch for zero, like body type wise, he's one of the best overall players Minnesota's had just for upside wise on defense in recent seasons. He's someone who's really emerged, but Tyler Nubin is the most impactful player on that defense. Being able to see the field, instincts, break on the ball, put him in coverage disguises, let him rob routes. He had an interception last week, a huge performance against Nebraska. Tyler Nubin is just the heartbeat of that defense overall, an athletic playmaker who can really change games for Minnesota.
Wow, and he's looks like it's his 5th year, and 20 tackles, 3 interceptions already on the season is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, he's been the player that everybody's been rallying around on the defensive side of the ball, and you got to have those impact players, and that's definitely his role. I mean, you look at Minnesota's defense, I think it's just been timely explosives that they allow. Just eyes in the wrong spot, get beat on a double move, or defense just gets out of a run fit occasionally. They've tightened things up as games have gone on, maybe some slower starts, and then found it as the game went on. And then in the Northwestern one, it's like the fourth quarter, the offense wasn't able to sustain some drives, the defense making some uncharacteristic plays. I think this game, what I'm watching for against Minnesota's defense is these teams, when Minnesota's in their zones, are cover 2, the Tampa 2 type of defensive structure. Teams seem to hit with the 4 verts, try to stretch the seam with the tight end. So I'm looking at like Loveland. How is Minnesota going to have answers for him? Post wheels, hitting the seam, getting the ball over the middle to Loveland. I'd be watching that matchup. I don't know how Minnesota is going to approach the schematics of this game. I have a few theories that I'm going to post on the website this week, but I think the middle of the field is what I'm watching. JJ McCarthy, you look at the numbers overall, I've been like amazed with 10+ yard passes over the middle of the field, like 80% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, very effective in that area. And then the play action game is built right off that rushing attack. So, diverse run game with so many different wrinkles between gap and zone principles and all those different things. Like, Minnesota has to be disciplined. I would expect Michigan's going to come out with a lot of misdirection in the run game to try to get Minnesota's eyes in the wrong place, and then, tie the play action game right into that. The guy I'm watching for in this game is Loveland, potentially as a player that could have a huge game for Michigan if they scheme it up how I think they do.
Yeah. Colston Loveland is one of those. I just call him he has that clutch gene, right? He's somebody that JJ McCarthy has a lot of trust in, and when no one else is available, and it's a 3rd and 9, and it's a must get, Loveland somehow gets it, right? And so I would definitely be watching out for that if I were you. And AJ Barner too, from a tight end standpoint. He's starting to come into it as well. He wasn't as much of an impact player the first couple of games, but he's starting to make some catches and doing what I kind of expected him to do coming as a transfer. And so I'd say both of those. And Roman Wilson also. You don't normally think of Michigan as a wide receiver school. You think of Ohio State, a USC, schools like that. But I will say Roman Wilson has been making some absolutely out of this world catches, right? The one last week at Nebraska where he literally grabbed like JJ had to throw it at exactly the right spot. And then Roman Wilson literally had to grab it where this guy's helmet was in the way, and it was a very awkward grab, but he was able to somehow do it. And that's a throw that very few wide receivers in college can make. So there's definitely a lot of talent on the offense nowadays compared to when you think of Michigan as more of a defensive school. It's been coming along. So there was actually on our show last night, Big Ten Live, we had Minnesota Dave, who's a big fan of Dave Valensky, who's a big fan of Minnesota. And I asked him this question. I'm curious to see what your take is. But for Minnesota to win, obviously it is at TCF, it is at your house, right? So you have home field advantage. What does Minnesota need to do to beat Michigan?
I'd say early down defense is a huge factor in this game. I mean, you can't be in a position where Michigan is ahead of the sticks. And when you look at the numbers, you look at the film, Michigan is able to do that consistently and then put themselves in that position where everything plays off the running game. You're able to influence the second level and then hit those play action crossers and then, get those guys like Roman Wilson involved. I think actually is a player to watch in this game. Minnesota puts Darius Green into the slot and passing downs, and then brings Aiden Gooseby in the game occasionally. So keep an eye on Roman Wilson out of the slot in those situations. Minnesota has to get Michigan backed up, and then their pass rush has to be effective in those situations. Michigan hasn't been in those situations offensively and passing downs all that much. So, you got to be able to, win on early downs and then, get them in long down situations. And then I think offensively, it's about, being able to throw the football effectively on early downs. I think getting yourself, those quick hitting completions, the switch releases, maybe some slants, hitting it out in the flat, some screens, try to get yourself in a position where you're ahead of the sticks and then be able to, keep your drives sustained, run some clock, and then try to blend in the running game occasionally, because this is going to be a game where you're going to have to slow play this thing, slow it down, keep the ball out of Michigan's hands, try to sustain drives, which that's not going to be an easy thing to do against a Michigan defense that is so disciplined and multiple and keeps you guessing all the time.
Yeah, so we do have one commenter in chat who is predicting a Minnesota victory.
Oh wow!
I think, it may be a troll. Where I'm kind of wondering if it's one of our other cast of characters coming in under a different name, but Minnesota, has a lead according to Beetle, noted sports commentator Beetle. But okay, so I think that's a fair thing, and obviously, being at your place, and there was, I'm trying to think, it was either East Carolina or, it was one of the early games when they were able to get Michigan backed up, right, to their two, it was very backed up, and they tried running it 3 straight times just to give the punter some more room. So if Minnesota's able to do that, if you have a good punter, and it turns into a Big Ten punt off, then that could be a situation where Minnesota finds a way to win. I'll be honest. Obviously, I think Michigan's probably going to win this one pretty comfortably. But it may be a situation like like a Rutgers, where maybe it takes a quarter, right? If Minnesota brings their A game and keeps Michigan from doing much scoring in the first quarter, it may take time. Joel Klatt made a comment, which I really love. It's like, Michigan's like a boa constrictor, and you're like trapped with a boa constrictor. And sometimes it takes a little while for the boa constrictor to get you.
Yep.
But once it does, then you're done for, right? And maybe it's a situation where Minnesota, does pretty well in the first quarter, and then we've got 40 miles per hour winds predicted. Oh man. Well, that could impact things a little bit.
Yeah, that could definitely change a lot. I hadn't saw that forecast. I know it's going to be in the 50s, dropping down into the mid 40s as the game goes on. So I definitely could see it potentially being windy, but yeah, that's a huge factor. Special teams could be a huge, I always think it's a big play anyways, the field position margin and how it correlates with winning. So Minnesota has to start fast. That's another thing too. You got to come out, try to get early points, get off to a good start, and then try to just control that thing. I mean, Michigan's 5th in standard down success rate at 59% right now. So they are not a team that you get behind the sticks very often. So I think playing the run and then, not allowing that run game to get going, and the discipline has to be there defensively if Minnesota wants to have a chance to win this game.
For sure. Yeah. So with all that said, we do obviously really appreciate that you're able to come on with us today. Please let everyone in the audience know where they can find you, the things you've got cooking. Let people know how to get involved.
You can check out my site, gophersguru.com, $5 a month for the subscription package. Just posted an article on the website, detailed breakdown of Minnesota's run game, what they're able to do formationally against Louisiana, and how, Minnesota's run game might look simplistic to some, but there are some details each week that make a huge difference for them to get a numbers advantage. And that could be a huge factor in this game against Michigan. When you got really good personnel that you're going against, you got to find every possible edge that you can get in the run game. So, watch for that on the website, and then the preview for the Michigan game be coming out soon. So all the little details and matchups that you need and some statistical insights that could be interesting for people, all on the site, gophersguru.com.
So everybody, please go ahead and check that out. Follow him, gophersguru.com, get the subscription. And Daniel, really appreciate you taking some time to come by Michigan Wolverines Live.
Thanks. Enjoy the game, man. It'll be fun to watch.
Can't wait. Can't wait. Thanks, Daniel.